Hey guys, I have a special video for you today. We're going to be talking about the new announcement that took place yesterday about the new format on MTGArena, and that's Alchemy. Wizards of the Coast came out and did a huge announcement talking about this new format and what it entails. So I want to go ahead and share that with you guys. For those of you who might have missed the announcement, we're going to take a look at some of the changes and new cards and what it means for it to be a digital-only format. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that means. Alchemy is going to be a digital-first format. That means there's going to be cards that are changed or cards that are designed to be only playable in this format because it's not something you can actually do in Arena. We have some of the spoiler cards, which I'll show you guys later, that does some weird, funky things that doesn't allow you to have these cards in paper, so it is a digital-first for that reason. The Alchemy format is going to be side by side with Standard. The two differences is that their cards are going to be rebalanced to try to make it more interesting or unique, to widen the amount of decks that are playable. The other thing is that they are going to be creating those digital-only cards that aren't going to be playable at your local card store. So while this does include all the Standard cards, it isn't going to be replacing Standard in any way. So you're going to have Standard on Arena that you can play at your card store with the cards as printed, as well as no digital only cards messing it up. But we're also going to have this other format on the side that's going to tweak or nerf and add things. So they are kind of side by side, but it's not a replacement. These digital only cards are things we see in Hearthstone and Runeterra, but we have yet to see in Magic really, except for a couple of historic ones. The last thing to note is that the rebalanced cards, if you own them, you actually own the regular version. If you own the regular version, you get the rebalanced card as well. So you can dip back and forth between the two different formats. I will be going over some of the finer points of Alchemy and what it means for the future of Arena after we look at some of the cards and see what they look like. So first we're going to touch on the rebalanced cards because I think that is one of the bigger things that people are most interested in because, you know, the changes is going to be touching on what some of you have been feeling for the last few months. And the first thing I would like to go over is the Asika's Chariot or Cadillac. I'm actually covering it just a little. Let me change sides because you guys know what it does on the other side. So Asika's Chariot normally comes into play with 2 cats. Now it's going to come into play with only 1 cat and crew for only 1 cat's worth of power. So this is a huge drastic change. It does mean that it crews for less, but it also means that you can actually kill a cat and maybe the Asika's Chariot doesn't have a target to copy when it does attack. So it's a bit of a balance. You get a little less power on board, but it's a little easier to crew. So it just kind of depends. And I think it does leave you a little bit more susceptible to removal. This will power up 2 and 3 damage spells in the format, making this, I think, overall a bit nerfed. So let's go ahead and keep it going, guys. We have the Omnath. It is banned in all of the formats, so now it's going to be actually playable. They did some small tweaks. I think it's pretty interesting. They added a mana cost as well. So again, just another card that they're hoping will be dropped down in power enough to actually be playable again. Goldspan Dragon here is, they're removing a piece of the text whenever it is targeted. So when you remove the dragon the turn it's played, they're actually not going to be getting that bonus benefit of getting that free treasure. So it is a substantial nerf. It's still a very good card, but I think this will be making it a little bit easier to play other things in the format. The next one is a very slight rework on Faceless Haven. They're only dropping it by 1 power. Everything else stays the same. It's still a colorless land, still takes 3 snows to activate, and it becomes a 3/3. So this is going to be just a little less dominant in the format. It's going to make the monocolor decks a bit weaker because a lot of times the best thing you're doing when your opponent clears the board is then Faceless Having them for lethal. And that is a pretty common situation, which is just making mono white and mono green super powerful. And now this will maybe mix things up, get some 2 to 3 color decks in there that isn't just Epiphany. And speaking of Epiphany, one of the villains of the format, we are actually changing Epiphany now to where the foretell cost is actually the same amount of mana. The only difference is that when you do foretell and cast it for that foretell cost, it means you get the birds, which means if you top deck an Epiphany and play it right as you go, no birds, which is going to make that like top deck Epiphany into 20 damage without your opponent getting to play any more spells a lot less likely. It stops them from digging for your second Epiphany on your second turn and getting to cast it right off the top because these control decks are getting a ton of mana. So we're going to be having a lot less situations where our opponent is just top decking Epiphanies into 20 points of damage, which I think will drastically remove the amount of power we're getting from this particular card. I don't necessarily care that it's going to cost me 1 on the foretell. I don't think that is a substantial nerf, but I do think the situations where they're not getting those extra birds is a huge deal. So we've nerfed, let's see, green, we've nerfed monocolor cards, we've nerfed Epiphany decks and the Is It Dragons in general, Dragons Epiphany. So the last thing we're going to go ahead and nerf is the Luminar Aspirant. This is a powerhouse in mono white. It does really well. I don't know if this is the card I personally would have targeted, but it's definitely a very snowbally card, and if your opponent doesn't have an answer, you're going to win. One of the things you'll see on these cards is next to the name, there's that little logo there, the arena symbol that's bright mythic red. So what that means is it's just a altered card, and it's only playable in Historic and in Alchemy. This is symbolizing the digital only formats. Again, those are going to be Historic Brawl, Historic, and Alchemy, and you're not going to be seeing this change in regular Standard or at your local card store. We've actually got one more thing. I've talked a lot about different nerfs for cards that are overpowered in Standard or have been banned, but they also wanted to show us that they're not just nerfing cards to widen the range of playability in the format, they're also giving a slight boost to cards in the format. And what they've done here with Cosmos Elixir is you're no longer just gaining 2 life, you're also getting to scry, which is actually a huge deal. It's not a huge bump, but it actually might help it see a little play, especially when it's side by side with some pretty key nerfs. Overall, the response in chat when this was being announced was very negative, that this is not what people have been asking for, and they want, multiplayer and Pioneer and things like that. But I would argue that as a whole, the Magic community has been very, very down on Standard as of late. And, Epiphany is a problem, Oko's a problem. The last 2 years or so, it's been very negative. And right now, with there really only being 3 S-tier decks in the format, and they change slightly, but very little, and they are very dominant. This is kind of an interesting thing that I think people have been asking for. It's really, really hard for Wizards to, play test to the extent of what kind of experience Arena gets over, just a month, because a team of 8 is just not going to get as much coverage as the entire public does over the span of a few months once we've broke a format. So yeah, I like this. I think this is really interesting. I have been having a lot of problems as a content creator, I guess I'm going to die to Epiphany again all day. So it is really cool that we might get to see some new cards. It'll make my viewer submitted deck lists a lot more fun and competitive. Again, guys, this is not replacing Standard in any way. This is an additional side-by-side format, so you can still play Standard. You can play this. You actually own both copies of the card, and you can play whichever one you'd like. All right, let's go ahead and move on to some of the new cards that are going to be developed for this new format. Wizards actually announced that there's going to be 63 new cards that are kind of spread out with all the themes in current Standard for this new set. These will be sold in separate packs, but they have the same sort of protection as current packs as far as the rarity protection. And then moving forward with each new set, they are going to be releasing between, I think, 20 to 30 new cards for each set. Now, you can just get these with your wild cards, or you can purchase the particular packs that they're in as well. This will make this form of Standard much more wide with a ton more cards and make it a lot more like an Eternal format. Actually, real quick, before we move on to these cards, I do want to make one more note about those changed cards, is that they did say every 4 to 6 weeks after a set is released is when they're going to make these changes based on finding out how the meta changes. And I think this is a really cool idea because it does let Wizards have a lot more flexibility and take a lot more risks with their set design. Now, bans will no longer be determined on whether or not those cards are selling packs. R&D can actually go in and fix the problems that we're seeing when we actually get into the gameplay a few weeks after a set is released. All right, so now we'll go ahead and talk about these new cards. These are, Alchemy and Historic specific cards that the reason that they aren't in any other format is because they just make no sense in paper. This one particularly is a little bit weird. You could technically have lightning bolts sitting on the side as like a token, but I do like this idea. It's getting a little bit closer to like a Hearthstone or a Runeterra feel. But I think some people will be into that, and I do think that having it as a side-by-side format really doesn't make us lose anything. So this creature is a 3/3 for 3 with haste. When it attacks, you conjure a lightning bolt. You just get to put it in your hand, which is pretty unique to Magic. And this conjure ability is the type of thing that we're going to be seeing moving forward with Alchemy and Historic. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. We have an Absorb Energy, counter target spell. Cards in your hand that share a card type with that spell perpetually gain one less cost. So perpetually means that it's forever. So you can cast it for one less, and that is a lot. And then you can also recur that spell from your graveyard and play it again for cheaper. So you could have this synergy where you're casting these things, dropping the mana value over time, and then just get to kind of dump out your hand. And that can also be card draw spells, things like that. It's pretty interesting and pretty unique. And it's not a mechanic we could have in paper, because you'd have to like, what, scratch it out, you know, write over it, maybe use a Sharpie on your sleeve or something. It doesn't really make sense. But this digital-only format is opening up a lot of tools to Wizards they haven't had in the past. All right, let's go ahead and see a card that is a little bit different. Destroy all creature cards in your hand, perpetually gain +1/+1. It's a built-in, before played, +1/+1 counter that can't be bounced off or can't be removed in any way. So it's very, very interesting. I think, you know, 4 mana Wrath is neat. It's a sorcery, which is fine. Definitely would be way too strong as an instant, but this is an interesting mechanic, and I'm kind of excited to see how it plays out. And there's little risk in that R&D can go in and just tweak the numbers or fix it if it turns out to be too powerful or too weak. Overall, I'm on board for these sorts of interesting, unique mechanics. I know the Magic community as a whole is pretty down on this Hearthstone/randomizing type of effect, but I don't see why we can't have both, to be perfectly honest with you. And I think it has a lot to offer to the new wave of people that are coming in from other games like Hearthstone and Runeterra. You know, Magic has a wide player base and we're growing every day. And this is something that appeals to everybody. Magic has always had a lot of formats. And yeah, these things aren't competitive, but neither is EDH, neither is Brawl. Literally, Arena has a ton of Brawl players, and you can't even like enter into a tournament or an event. People just love playing these casual brews and fun things, and I think these will be a great addition to that. The next card I want to talk about actually is, I'm not going to get into what it does completely, but this is the Horror of Zava, and I just noticed a cute little thing on the card. This is a digital-only card, meaning you can't play it in paper, you can't play it anywhere else, you can't play it on MTGO, but for some reason the text box does say any opponent may sacrifice a creature if they do tap this card. Why on earth can any opponent do it if we only have access to one opponent? It could say your opponent, that's an extra letter, so it could just be a formatting thing. There's a lot of letters and text on this card, but I don't know, maybe there's hope for those of you guys who are interested in 2HG and Commander, because I think that is very high on the list of things people have been asking for. So I'm choosing to believe that this is just a little foreshadowing, let's hope, to what's to come. All right, so that wraps up the cards I wanted to show you guys as far as the nerfs and the new digital-only cards. There were a few more spoilers, and there's some to come, and I will put a link down to the information pages for you for those of you guys who are interested in looking more into this. But I also wanted to take a few minutes and touch on some of my thoughts and some upcoming events for our channel in regards to Alchemy. So just to sum it all up for you guys one more time is that these are digital-only changes, so it will only affect Alchemy and Historic Brawl. This will not affect Standard in any meaningful way. These will not touch paper in any way. And yeah, so we are going to be splitting the player base between Alchemy and Standard, but I would argue that for those people who get burnt out for dying to Epiphany or whatever the case may be, they get bored of the same 3 decks, they might switch over, which would actually increase the overall player base of the Standard format. So splitting the player base might not be such a bad idea. We wouldn't actually be losing very many players. I myself tend to stop playing a format when things become boring or when there's one deck that I feel is overwhelmingly powerful. And as a reminder, if you own one of these cards, you own it for both formats, so there's really no downside. Now, where you start to lose a little extra money when playing Alchemy is that they will be introducing the 63 new cards with Alchemy's release, as well as 20 to 30 new cards with each set after that. My hope is that they have varying rarities, so it's not just, 20 to 30 mythic and rares, because that would hurt. But I think it'll be a little bit more like Mystical Archive, where we'll see a wide range of things that are going to be playable in the format. The last thing I want to mention for this video is that we actually had a really cool opportunity come to our channel and community with the release of Alchemy, and that is I was one of 6 creators to be invited to preview a ton of the cards. So I think I have 6 to 10 preview cards that will be released on the 7th. We'll have a YouTube video for that, and I'll be doing it on stream as well. And then we're also going to be doing a sponsored 2-hour stream of Alchemy, checking out the new cards and all of the formats. You guys can submit viewer deck lists and all sorts of cool stuff. So you'll definitely see some videos of that here in the future. This video, however, isn't sponsored. I just wanted to put something short out for those of you guys who didn't get to join the format, and also just to give you my opinion on what I thought of the format in general and what it means for the future of Magic. All right, so I put this video together a little last minute, so I know I was a little rambly and not very put together, but I wanted to get this out as soon as I could. If you have any other questions about the format or what it might mean, feel free to put them down below. I actually was part of like a pre-meeting about this, and I was able to ask questions before the announcement went live. So I do have some good information for you if you do happen to have any of those questions, and there will also be some links below so you guys can get more information from the actual Wizards channels as well. All right, guys, that's it for me. Make sure you guys leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts on the new format. I appreciate you guys checking out the video, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye. I'd like to give a special thank you to those of you who have signed up for our Patreon. I couldn't make this content without you. Also to Cool Stuff Inc. and KMC Sleeves for supporting the channel as well. Definitely check them out and use our discount codes to support the channel.